What's up, y'all? Night Rain's here, and I'm finally back at it after being gone like it was my business, and business was good. But never mind all that. Today, I'll be bringing to y'all my One Piece top 30 strongest all-time characters ranking for 2025. In the year of our Lord 2026. Now, one could make the case that I'm getting to this a tad bit late, but as I sometimes tell my employer, I'm not late for today, I'm just really early for tomorrow. But before I get to the actual ranking, which is also doubling as a tier list, I have to give y'all a rundown on how things are set up in terms of format, rules, and methodology. My tier list format is modeled after the general framework and structure that we've seen for most, if not all, Emperor crews, because that seemed to be the most consistent and uniform strength-based organizational structure in the story that I thought most everyone would understand conceptually at the different tier levels. The tier list is divided into 5 overall tiers, those being Emperor level, Semi-Emperor level, First Commander level, Second Commander level, and Third Commander level. 4 of those 5 overall tiers are then subdivided further into several sub-tiers to more clearly depict the varying levels of strength among characters. And just as an aside, in my personal estimation, the strength difference between characters in the same overall tier is not overly significant. For example, a character in Beyond Emperor is definitely stronger than a character in Emperor Minus, but that Emperor Minus character will still make that Beyond Emperor character fight for their life. Although I do think the strength differences among the varying commander levels is a bit bigger. As far as rules go, I have 3 rules that govern who/what can and can't be on the tier list and how they're scaled. Rule 1. Characters being ranked off of the peak level of strength that they can muster, on demand, of their own will, intention, and effort, not something situational or circumstantial. So nothing like Domiro vs. Xebec, which was forced upon him by Imu, or Sulong, Inuarashi, or Nekomamushi, which is entirely plot dependent on the time of day and the weather, will be found on the tier list. Rule 2. Only characters with reasonably determinable and accurate scaling are considered for the tier list. If there are some characters that you expected to see, but you don't end up seeing them, then that's simply because those characters don't have enough information to accurately scale them, or those characters simply aren't strong enough to make the cut. And Rule 3. If assumptions have to be made, then only reasonable assumptions with some kind of basis in the reality of the story are acceptable, and only the lowest/least favorable interpretation will be used. As for my methodology, videos like this often see most people usually work from the bottom up, the weakest to the strongest. However, I'm going to be working from the top down, the strongest to the weakest. And the reason that I'm doing it this way is because I think that it does a better job of setting the upper limit of strength for the series that all other characters are judged against, and informs why some characters land where they do, but just as importantly, where they don't land. But with all of that out the way, let's jump into it. At numbers 1 and 2, there's Harald and Xebec. They were consistently portrayed as equals, if not Xebec being slightly superior, but Harald became at least slightly stronger once he was buffed by the Depths Covenant from Imu. As for Xebec, he was stated to be the strongest enemy/rival of Roger, which makes him definitively stronger, at least slightly, than the likes of Roger, Whitebeard, and Garp ever were, since they were all stated equals of each other. At numbers 3 through 5, there's Whitebeard, Roger, and Garp. Whitebeard was Roger's stated equal, and Garp was Roger's stated equal, therefore making all of them equals to each other. Whitebeard and Roger have been repeatedly implied to be a level beyond any pirate existing in the modern age by the likes of Garp, Shiki, Kaidou, Big Mom, Law, Doflamingo, and Buggy. If I had to say who was strongest between the 3 of them, I would have to say that it's Whitebeard because he was already equaling Roger with his known max level of strength, but he could theoretically push his Devil Fruit beyond that if he were willing to forego his own personal safety and the safety of his own crew members. Whitebeard was also known as the world's strongest man, while Roger and Garp were at the peak of their own powers. Roger's illness was never shown, stated, or implied to be affecting his combat ability and physical state, until after his final known fight with Whitebeard, so that can't be used as an excuse to give him a scaling edge over Whitebeard. And the Pirate King title isn't necessarily even a measure of strength, especially during Roger's era, because it can theoretically be achieved purely through stealth and exploration, and Whitebeard never even wanted anything like that to begin with. And as for Roger and Garp, either of them could be argued for the number 4 spot, but I think Garp being at the number 5 spot makes the most sense, considering the next 2 upcoming characters on the ranking and how their scaling relates to his. At numbers 6 and 7, there's Sengoku and Shiki. Sengoku is stated to have been closely relative to Garp's strength, which makes him closely relative to Whitebeard and Roger's strength as well. As for Shiki, he performed better in his 2v1 fight against Garp and Sengoku than he realistically should have been able to, destroying half of Marineford on the watch of the 2 greatest Marines of all time, and potentially dropping Garp according to the anime, all while at a disadvantage, showing his close relativity to them both, which also lines up with the fact that he was Sengoku's pirate rival, similar to how Roger was Garp's pirate rival. Now, I don't believe that the intervention of both Garp and Sengoku was required to stop his rampage, but it only makes sense that both of them would step in to defend the headquarters of the military organization that they've dedicated nearly their entire lives to, and I don't believe that either Garp or Sengoku were going all out due to the fight happening at an important world government facility, and the fact that he would have been defeated rather quickly if they were going all out. At numbers 8 and 9, there's Kaidou and Big Mom. They were consistently portrayed as very comparable, aside from some instances of blatantly sabotaging, disingenuous, and inorganic writing by Oda, with Kaidou being at least slightly stronger. Kaidou is the most powerful and complete fighter that we've seen on full display to this point in the series, possessing top-tier physical stats in all major categories, top-tier Haki, all at advanced levels, with the armament Haki at the emissions level, and at least a high-tier Devil Fruit that provides access to flight, fire, wind, and maybe lightning energy projection, and enhanced physical stats in all major categories. As for Big Mom, she possesses top-tier physical stats in all major categories besides speed, advanced forms of Conqueror's Haki, and armament Haki, at the emissions level to be specific, and at least a high-tier Devil Fruit that can create nigh-invulnerable auto-turrets that theoretically grant her a lot of moveset versatility, particularly as it pertains to elements, can boost her physical stats, at least strength and durability, and possibly endurance, at the cost of available future lifespan, with the normal human lifespan peaking at 140 in the series, with the peak lifespan of superhumans such as Big Mom going beyond that, giving her several decades of lifespan to maneuver with, and can provide flight and allows for limited healing. In what the community commonly refers to as Kaidou's top 5, Kaidou referenced 5 characters that he believed were strong enough to fight him in what I'm assuming to be a serious degree fight. Now, there are some people that take Kaidou's top 5 to be evidence of the characters that stand at the top of the strength scale, or even evidence of the characters that definitely don't. But I would argue that those are faulty conclusions that can only be reached through contextual misinterpretation. There are 2 reasons why Kaidou's top 5 probably doesn't mean what you think it means. The first reason is that you'd have to agree that the specific version of base Luffy, or even that version of Gear 4 Luffy, before even learning Advanced Conqueror's Haki, and that only lightly damaged Kaidou and prompted this line of thinking, was very comparable in strength to the likes of Xebec, Whitebeard, Roger, Shanks, and Oden, which is demonstrably untrue, and something that no one with even just a passable reading comprehension level should believe. The second reason is that it couldn't have been an objective list of the strongest characters in the series that Kaidou knew of because Garp and Sengoku or Shiki weren't included. Harald is excluded from this because us readers didn't know about him at the time, and we'll just assume that Oda didn't want to give us an unknown variable in that moment. And it couldn't have been an objective list of the strongest pirates in the series that Kaidou knew of because Oden was included instead of Shiki, Mihawk, or the 2 to 3 other pirates, Big Mom being one of them, that have objectively superior strength scale. So Big Mom not being included in Kaidou's top 5 is irrelevant and does nothing to negate the portrayal of close strength comparability between Big Mom and Kaidou. And any deficiencies that you found in Big Mom's performance in Wano can be contextually explained away. Some moments, such as Frankie popping a wheelie on her forehead, or Jinbei and Robin combo rolling her out of the castle, are just comedic gags. Big Mom was able to be removed from the rooftop instead of Kaido because she is the only one of them that could conveniently be separated from their powers of flight. But the biggest cause of Big Mom's failures in Wano were her arrogance and her unwillingness to take her opponents seriously and just use her full power. For instance, you can't point to a single instance of her using Advanced Conqueror's Haki offensively against Law and Kid, which is the main way that 100% of the characters known to have the ability use it. Maybe you could say she used it defensively towards the end, when she was already in the compromising position of dangling from a giant hole and trying to counteract the force of a pretty powerful attack from a position of 0 or negative leverage. You can't point to a single instance of her using Advanced Armament Haki offensively or defensively against Law and Kid. She didn't amplify her power by sacrificing multiple years of her available lifespan, even though the normal human lifespan peaks at 140 in this series, but the peak lifespan of superhumans, such as Big Mom, goes beyond that, giving her several decades, at least nearly 2 decades even if we lowball her, of a lifespan to maneuver with, but she only used 1 year. And not using her main homies as free-roaming support as effectively invulnerable auto turrets like she's done previously, and not combining them into a form to do attacks that honestly seem weaker than what she was doing before. At numbers 10 through 12, there's Blackbeard, Shanks, and Mihawk. Shanks is one of the emperors, which all generally have comparable portrayal and standing amongst their contemporaries and the world at large, so in the direct realm of Kaidou and Big Mom is a logical landing spot for him. Of course, that's not to say there isn't a hierarchy and there aren't differences in power amongst them. Now with that being said, nothing has been shown by or said about Shanks to suggest that he's superior to either Kaidou or Big Mom. He defeated Loki, but the context behind that is completely unknown, so it's not currently possible to assess its value. He stopped Kaido from going to attack Whitebeard prior to the Marineford War, but it was the entire red-haired pirates against just Kaido and King, while likely at sea, which is both a numbers and total power disadvantage for Kaido's side and a location disadvantage for Kaido's side, given that both Kaido and King are Devil Fruit users who can't swim, and Kaido happens to get knocked down in dragon form a lot, which is the only form that grants Kaido flight. He blocked Akainu's attack, but this feat contextually occurred as an off-guard moment, making things significantly more effective than they would be under normal circumstances, as evidenced by the changed expression on Akainu's face, as if Shanks' appearance was unexpected. Additionally, Akainu's attack was originally meant for a pre-time skip Kobe, which wouldn't have required much effort to snuff out on Akainu's end. So what Shanks did was not representative of a power difference or superiority. He stopped the Marineford War, but it's likely that this was due in large part to the fact that he is a rather neutral entity for an emperor whose actions or inaction have historically been more beneficial to the world government than not. He was actively trying to maintain the balance of the three great powers during the pre-time skip by trying to persuade Whitebeard to recall Ace from pursuing Blackbeard and stopping Kaido from making the Marineford situation even more chaotic. He doesn't typically go out of his way to directly challenge or antagonize the world government, and he knocks down challenging pirates as they come to him, not unlike the designed partial function of a warlord. So there was no need for the world government to make an enemy of one of their greatest assets when their major goals of killing Ace and Whitebeard had already been accomplished. He and his crew are indeed powerful, but given what the story has told us about how very comparable the emperors and admirals are, if Marineford had continued, then the red-haired pirates would have definitely gotten slaughtered. He immobilized Ryokugyu, but this feat contextually occurred as an off-guard attack, which makes things significantly more effective than they would be under normal circumstances, as evidenced by Ryokugyu's questioning of whose haki was assaulting him in that particular moment. Additionally, Shanks used observation haki to surveil Ryokugyu as he was thrashing Momonosuke and got angry for the sake of the son of his former crewmate, and Shanks is strongest / scariest / most serious when those he cares about are hurt or threatened, according to the Ace novel as well as Chapter 1. So what he did to Ryokugyu was likely an attack with a significant portion of his effort behind it. And Ryokugyu specifically retreated from the red-haired pirates as a whole and not just Shanks, while sandwiched on the other side by another Emperor crew and their allies. He defeated and one-shotted Kid, but this feat contextually occurred as an off-guard attack, which makes things significantly more effective than they would be under normal circumstances, as evidenced by Kid's surprise at being confronted by him in that particular moment. Additionally, he looked briefly into the future and saw the carnage and brutality that Kid was going to perpetrate onto his fleet allies with Damn Punk, and got angry. And he's strongest, scariest, most serious when those he cares about are hurt or threatened, according to the Ace novel and Chapter 1. So what he did to Kid was likely an attack with a significant portion of his effort behind it, which is not the kind of effort that Big Mom or Kaido ever put forth towards Kid or Law. His Conqueror's Haki feats, though impressive, don't necessarily prove his superiority over his Emperor peers. Emitting Conqueror's Haki over such vast distances is not something that either Kaido or Big Mom have been shown to do, but for that to be an upscale for Shanks, you'd have to provide evidence that suggests Kaido and or Big Mom even have an inclination to use their Conqueror's Haki in such a way, let alone are incapable of using it that way or to a similar degree of potency. Both Kaido and Big Mom can use advanced Conqueror's Haki, which means that they can also use the more basic application of just emitting Conqueror's Haki, yet they hardly ever used it in that way. Both have used it this way unconsciously once, and Big Mom has used it this way intentionally once. And short of Kaido and Big Mom expressing an inability to pull off something similar, we have no reason to believe that their upper limits are inferior to his. As for Blackbeard, he's actually over Shanks because Shanks seems to be genuinely ducking, or at least fake hunting for him, and here's how we can conclude that. Shanks showed up off the coast of Wano to protect Luffy and company from a potential attack from a canonically opportunistic Blackbeard, who was a no-show. Later on, Shanks asks what looks to be his intel officer about the whereabouts of Blackbeard, as if Shanks is specifically looking for him, and yet, instead of going to the publicly known base of operations of Blackbeard, Shanks decided to detour to Elbaf before detouring even further to deal with Bartolomeo and what essentially amounts to a minor publicity issue. So Blackbeard seems to be stronger than Shanks right now. And as for Mihawk, he's actually below Shanks. Mihawk currently holds the world's strongest swordsman title, largely because of how the story has indicated that the title is earned or transferred. A challenger must defeat the current title holder in a duel for the challenger to become the new title holder. Mihawk has refused to duel Shanks for 12 straight years after the loss of his sword arm, so even if Shanks was actually stronger than Mihawk, he can't attain the title if Mihawk continually refuses to duel him, and it's highly doubtful that the Swordsman Code would allow for Shanks to attack an unwilling participant. As far as why Mihawk refuses to duel Shanks, there are two possible reasons. Mihawk thinks Shanks is too weak to make for a worthy duel, or Mihawk thinks it would be shameful or dishonorable to duel a one-armed swordsman, or some other subjective personal reason, neither of which makes sense, as I'll demonstrate. If Mihawk is so strong that someone as strong as Shanks isn't even worth his time or interest, then that would almost certainly make Mihawk the strongest character in the series by a margin that's wider than all of outside. Which is an absurd sentiment, given that Luffy is supposed to be stronger than Zoro by the end of the series, but couldn't be under these conditions. Now I can accept that a character is stronger than an emperor, but I personally can't even imagine a character viewing a challenge from an emperor with indifference or apathy. If Mihawk refuses to duel Shanks for personal reasons, then that's fine, but it begins to seem like a nonsensical decision because Mihawk has been bored with his life ever since. So bored, in fact, that he kills time by harassing small-time pirates from the Grand Line back to the East Blue and entertains a duel with Vista, a swordsman that is significantly weaker than Shanks, instead of just dueling Shanks. Mihawk also has two stated desires for a new future rival, that they surpass his former rival, Shanks, and that they surpass himself. If Mihawk was stronger than Shanks, even just slightly, then the rival will have inherently surpassed Shanks on their way to surpassing Mihawk, making Mihawk's stated desire for a rival to surpass Shanks redundant on a low-end interpretation of Mihawk's strength, or laughably pointless on a high-end interpretation of Mihawk's strength. So the fact that Oda saw fit to put both of those stated desires into the series would invariably mean that the surpassing Mihawk and surpassing Shanks is effectively achieving the same thing, meaning that Mihawk and Shanks are about equal in strength. But taking all available series context into consideration, Mihawk almost inarguably ducking Shanks for a decade, just as I pointed out, Shanks is at least slightly stronger than Mihawk. At numbers 13 through 15, there's Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru. The original admirals of the pre-time skip all had nearly identical levels of strength portrayal at Marineford, but I will admit that Akainu did get the lion's share of focus during Marineford, which might lead some to think that he was the strongest admiral at the time, but I would argue that's just because it was his introductory arc into the story, much like Aokiji had Long Ring Longland and Kizaru had Saboti. But Akainu and Aokiji later went on to have their intense duel, where Akainu proved his supremacy, and both likely grew at least slightly stronger from the encounter. As for Kizaru, with no known strength growth over the course of the time skip, he's at the bottom of that particular peer group, but compared to the new admirals of the time skip and the post-time skip, he has the best Devil Fruit, although it's potentially a conversation with Fujitora, and the best armament hockey displayed so far, although Fujitora almost definitely has the best observation hockey, meaning he's at the top of this particular peer group. At numbers 16 and 17, there's Fujitora and Ryokugyu. The new admirals of the time skip and the post-time skip both have had nearly identical levels of strength portrayal so far. If I had to say who was strongest between them, then I would have to say it's Fujitora, because he has a better Devil Fruit, better observation hockey, and a supreme grade blade. Although Ryokugyu doesn't seem to have a black blade in the manga, not that having a black blade alone means anything quantifiable, but it's unclear because the anime didn't portray it the same way. Some people might try to argue that Ryokugyu is superior due to Fujitora reappearing injured after their fight during the Reverie, while Ryokugyu reappeared seemingly uninjured. But I would argue that's a matter of misinterpretation. They fought at the Reverie, but the next time we see each of them, Fujitora was in bandages and Ryokugyu wasn't. But what's misunderstood about those appearances is that we see Fujitora a week after the Reverie and Ryokugyu a little over 2 weeks after the Reverie. So Ryokugyu just had more time than Fujitora to recover from the fight before we ever saw him again. At numbers 18 and 19, there's Luffy and Ryuma. Luffy is a certified top tier and absolute monster, possessing top tier physical stats, top tier hockey, all at advanced levels, and a top tier Devil Fruit. His strength is immense, and yet there's no actual evidence, meaning statements or implications, that Luffy has surpassed any of the top tiers that I've already mentioned. He's still weaker than Kaido, because Kaido holding up the island for such an extended period of time likely had a cumulatively draining effect on Kaido's strength and or stamina, as evidenced by the island's foundation crumbling more the longer and harder Kaido had to fight. And even though both he and Kaido were heavily weakened by the time the Gear 5 section of the fight was reached, Gear 5 grants him a genuine healing factor, as evidenced by him actually being dead for a time, and then him coming back to life at the same time as his Devil Fruit awakening. So even though he was dead, which people will use to argue that he was more weakened than Kaido was upon reviving, which is not a totally unreasonable thought, he spent some time goofing around and healing on the rooftop before resuming the fight with Kaido. So their starting physical conditions were comparable, and as they fought, Kaido's condition would continue to get worse, as evidenced by Kaido faltering to one knee when Kaido hadn't taken any recent damage in chapter 1045, while his condition would maintain or even improve. Him falling/slipping out of Gear 5 was due to his inexperience with the form instead of his condition, and though Kaido couldn't overpower his Bajirang gun at the time, Kaido likely could have just dodged it and won the fight if he wasn't so arrogant, and just used his advanced observation hockey and not taken needless attacks in general. He's still weaker than Kizaru because Kizaru has to restrain his strength at or around locations, items, and people deemed valuable to the world government. Kizaru was mentally/emotionally conflicted and had wavering resolve about fighting enemies he used to have a relationship with and those protecting them, which is something that is known to weaken a character's strength in this series. Aside from White Star Gun, which is Luffy's second strongest attack that landed to moderate effect, he never did anything of consequence to Kizaru that wasn't facilitated by Kizaru not fully paying attention to him. And Kizaru could have won the fight 4 separate times, such as speed blitzing him with the sword at the opening of the fight, using the sword when speed blitzing him in Gear 4, actually attacking him with the sword while he was genuinely unaware of Kizaru's presence when utilizing the clones, and stabbing him instead of feeding him when he was immobilized on the ground. The only real concrete scaling that we have for him is being on a narratively greater level than Oden, having accomplished what Oden didn't, and a narratively similar level to Ryuma in the eyes of Wano. At numbers 20 through 23, there's Kong, Rayleigh, Oden, and Gaban. Rayleigh and Gaban were stated to have been equals or near equals, but being that most right hands have historically been the strongest crew member after the captain, Rayleigh is assumed to be slightly stronger. Rayleigh was also implied to have had close strength comparability to Kizaru, and to a lesser degree Blackbeard, while in his prime, though inferior to both. As for Oden, he was the second greatest being to ever be produced in Wano's history as of now. He was the right-hand man of the Whitebeard pirates, which were stated to rival the Roger pirates, likely making him Rayleigh's equal, if not stronger, and at least slightly stronger than Gaban. And as for Kong, he's actually at the top of this particular character grouping because, to me, the narrative surrounding top marines like admirals and fleet admirals, top pirates like the emperors, and how they relate to each other wouldn't make any sense if the fleet admiral of any era, at least while in their prime age range, was weaker than any top pirate's right hand, excluding Zoro in the future because he's a main character who's meant to break the mold. So that would necessarily make Kong at least slightly stronger than the likes of Rayleigh and Oden. Now mind you, everything I just said was headcanon, meaning it's not actually supported by any evidence, but I don't think you can deny that the logic is very consistent with the narrative, seeing as Sengoku and Akainu were clearly stronger than any right hand in their respective eras, with Mihawk and Aokiji being somewhat of exceptions in Akainu's case. At numbers 24 through 26, there's Chaton, Momousagi, and the Nameless Admiral. The Almost Admirals, as I refer to them, were in contention for the Admiral vacancies during the time skip, along with Fujitora and Ryokugyu. Though ultimately not selected to become admirals, they necessarily had to be comparable to the strength of the admirals, particularly the new ones, to warrant the consideration in the first place, but they're slightly weaker. There's no difference in the strength portrayal between them, but being that Chaton is a man and Momousagi is a woman, I'm compelled to believe that he is slightly stronger due to Oda's blatant sexism. As for the Nameless Admiral, the Admiral title is among the purest, strength-based titles in the series, up there with the World's Strongest Man and World's Strongest Swordsman, and the title itself denotes a minimum level of strength that makes any character associated with it an undeniable top tier. The Nameless Admiral was killed by Xebec, who seemed to come away from the altercation with very little battle damage. However, this outcome was given to readers without all preceding context, so poison or some sort of sneak attack is just as likely the explanation as is an easy, straightforward fight for Xebec. But being that there is no affirmative strength feats or lore that I can attribute to the Nameless Admiral, I have to assume that the Almost Admirals are superior. At number 27, there's Dragon. The only reason I can even place him here as last amongst the true top tiers is because he's the leader of the Revolutionary Army, a major military faction, which would require him to be at least this strong for his faction's existence and supposed relevance to make any narrative sense. He has no meaningful combat feats or strength lore, and I don't care about his family lineage because strong genetics don't guarantee strength in an individual, as evidenced by Harald. At number 28, there's Beckman. The Red Hair Pirates were stated to be the most well-balanced crew with no weak links, which I took to mean that the commanders of the Red Hair Pirates were at least slightly stronger than any other modern Emperor crew at every position across the board. So he should be at least slightly stronger than the likes of Marco, Zoro, and Crocodile. There's another statement that people like to cling to in an attempt to justify higher scaling, but that conclusion is a matter of misinterpretation. He is stated to be a comparably feared existence to Shanks by the powerful warriors of the New World. But what this statement actually does, instead of elevating him to Shanks' level, is drag Shanks down to his level, and make Shanks weaker than more characters than probably intended, because Kizaru was way too comfortable disrespecting Beckman to his face and suffering no consequences for it, which means that Kizaru, who Fujitora and Ryokugyu aren't much weaker than, could disrespect Shanks to his face regardless of whether Shanks wanted to stop it or not. So the statement is either not true at all, or it's not true in the way some think it is. For instance, the minimum standard for what's considered a powerful New World warrior needs to be factored in, but it holds no relevance either way. And for those that are really reaching, the Beckman is the moon to Shanks' sun statement is ambiguous as to what exactly it means, but if you want to say it's about strength, then the moon, which is Beckman, is at least 100 times less than the sun, which is Shanks, by any standard of measurement you can think of. So that's just worse for Beckman's overall strength outlook anyway. At number 29, there's Crocodile. Given the perceived threat and world standing comparable to other Emperor crews that is ascribed to Cross Guild by the world government, and the fact that it's comprised of only 2 notable members, the narrative would require him to scale to semi-Emperor level, at least, for their particular part of the story to make sense. And the last character on this ranking, but technically not, is Loki. Give me a minute, I'll explain. He's immensely strong, but it's currently impossible to pinpoint exactly where he ranks. He creates a power scaling paradox that just keeps rotating a group of 11 to 13 characters around towards the top spot, not allowing for any concrete scaling at the pinnacle. But allow me to walk you through that paradox. Loki takes the top spot because he beat Harald, assuming Harald was trying his hardest in the fight, because it honestly didn't seem that way to me. Then Blackbeard, Shanks, and Mihawk exceed him because Shanks defeated him, assuming Shanks won a legitimate and clean 1v1 because we don't have the context behind it. Then Whitebeard, Roger, Garp, Sengoku, and Shiki exceed them because of the countless statements that make it very clear that Whitebeard at his peak was the strongest pirate to have existed after Xebec's death. Then Xebec exceeds them because of the definitive statement that says he was stronger than Whitebeard ever was. Then Harald exceeds him because they were already equals or near equals before Harald got buffed by the Depths Covenant. And then the loop starts over again at Loki. And as an aside, you could argue for Kaidou and Big Mom folding into the Blackbeard, Shanks, and Mihawk step as well. So I'll put Loki at 13 for now, which is likely a low ball, and then move everyone else on the ranking that exists outside of the paradox down 1 slot. So starting Akainu at 14. Now that I've run through everyone on this all-time character ranking, I'll throw a visual aid up on the screen just to recap where everyone falls and how they relate to each other on the tier list. Minus Loki, who's vaguely floating somewhere in Emperor Plus or beyond Emperor. Pause it if you need to. And just to satisfy your likely curiosity, here's my current character ranking, minus Loki and also accounting for whether Kaidou and Big Mom are actually still alive. Pause it if you need to. Here's a composite tier list of all of those characters minus Loki. Pause it if you need to. And here's a composite tier list of the entirety of the relevant global strength ecosystem in the series minus Loki. Pause it if you need to. There are some honorable mention characters that didn't make the cut for the tier list, but it's still worth talking about. Those characters being Nika, Joy Boy, Emu, the Gorosei, the Holy Knights, but specifically talking about Garling and Shamrock, and the Seraphim. They're all probably really strong and future plot relevant, but we don't yet have the information to accurately pinpoint where their strength is. But that's all I've got for y'all today. Those are just my opinions and conclusions that I've reached based on evidence, logic, and reasonable interpretations and assumptions. They're not necessarily facts of the story, but be sure to like the video, but only if you did. Subscribe for more content like this. Comment down below to let me know your stance on the discussion. Feel free to disagree with me if you do, but please do it respectfully and give an explanation as to why, along with your evidence. Night Reigns, out.